You leave the conversation and immediately start replaying it. Why did I say that? Did I talk too much? Did I seem awkward? Did they even like me? Most people think social attractiveness comes from adding something, more confidence, more charisma, more things to say. But the people who leave the strongest impression are often doing the opposite. They're subtracting. They're removing the habits that quietly signal insecurity. Think about the most quietly attractive person you've met. Not the loudest, not the funniest, not the center of attention. Just someone whose presence felt calm, solid, and effortless. Someone who never seemed desperate to be noticed. That's because true attractiveness is rarely created by performance. It's created by self-possession. Many people enter conversations carrying invisible needs, the need to impress, the need to be liked, the need to prove their worth. And when every interaction becomes a search for validation, people can feel it, even if no one says a word. The Stoics understood something modern life constantly distracts us from. The more your value depends on other people's reactions, the less natural your presence becomes. Silent attractiveness begins when you stop asking the room to tell you who you are, because people trust those who appear at home within themselves. Not perfect, not fearless, simply grounded. In this video, you'll discover 11 socially attractive habits that have nothing to do with tricks, status, or manipulation. They are habits of presence, restraint, and self-respect. And by the end, you'll understand why the most attractive person in the room is often the one who no longer needs the room's approval. If this feels familiar, leave a like as a small commitment to face these patterns honestly. Because the first habit begins with a mistake most people make every day without realizing it. The first habit is surprisingly simple. Stop trying to prove that you're interesting. Most people don't realize how much energy they spend performing. They explain too much. They tell stories that didn't need to be told. They stretch simple facts into impressive ones. They rush to show their intelligence, experience, or value. And the strange part is that the harder they try, the less convincing they become. Why? Because people pay attention not only to what you say, but to what your behavior is asking for. If every sentence is secretly asking for approval, that need becomes visible, not consciously, but emotionally. People feel it. A Stoic perspective changes everything here. Your value is not created in the conversation. The conversation only reveals the relationship you already have with yourself. A man who respects himself does not constantly advertise himself. He doesn't need every person he meets to confirm his worth. Imagine two people at a dinner table. One keeps steering the conversation back to himself. The other speaks when he has something meaningful to add. Hours later, people often remember the second person more clearly, not because he dominated attention, because he never chased it. Here's a practical exercise for the next 24 hours. Use the one sentence less rule. Whenever you feel the urge to keep explaining, stop one sentence earlier. When you want to add one more detail to prove your point, don't. When you want to justify yourself unnecessarily, pause. You'll quickly notice something surprising. Most of the extra talking wasn't serving communication. It was serving insecurity. And the moment you stop feeding that habit, your words begin to carry more weight. Because silence, when it comes from confidence, is not emptiness. It's evidence that you don't need to fill every space to matter. And that leads to the second habit, one that people notice long before you even open your mouth. Most people think attractiveness comes from saying the right thing, but long before words matter, people notice how you respond to pressure. A small criticism, an awkward moment, a disagreement, a joke at your expense. These moments reveal more about a person than an hour of conversation. Many people react instantly. They defend themselves, interrupt, explain, argue, or become visibly uncomfortable. The problem isn't the emotion itself. The problem is becoming controlled by it. The Stoics believed that the space between an event and your response is where your freedom lives. And in social situations, that freedom is incredibly attractive. Not because it looks powerful, because it feels stable. Think about someone who receives criticism and immediately becomes defensive. Now compare that with someone who pauses, considers the comment, and responds calmly. Who seems more trustworthy? Who seems more confident? Usually the person who needed less emotional urgency. Calmness communicates something important. It tells people that your identity is not hanging from every opinion they have of you, and that creates a sense of strength that cannot be faked. A practical exercise is simple. The next time someone surprises you with criticism, teasing, disagreement, or even praise, wait 3 seconds before responding. Not as a technique, as a discipline. Use those 3 seconds to observe your first impulse instead of obeying it. You'll discover that many reactions lose their power when they aren't expressed immediately. And over time, people begin to notice something different about you. You become harder to provoke, harder to shake, harder to manipulate emotionally. Remember this: the strongest presence in the room is rarely the most expressive. It's often the most composed. And once you learn to control your reactions, you'll discover another rare skill that makes people feel genuinely drawn toward you. One of the most attractive habits is also one of the rarest: listening without waiting for your turn to speak. Most conversations are not conversations at all. They're alternating monologues. One person talks while the other prepares a response. Then they switch roles. Very little attention is actually being given, and people feel that. They may not say it directly, but they notice when someone is only listening long enough to redirect the spotlight. That's why genuine attention has become so powerful. In a world full of distraction, being fully present feels unusual. Imagine a dinner with 6 people. Everyone is talking. Stories overlap. Opinions compete for space. At the end of the night, one person remembers that someone mentioned a difficult week at work. A month later, he asks about it. Most people won't remember the joke that got the biggest laugh, but they will remember how that question made them feel seen. This is where many people misunderstand attraction. They think attraction comes from being the most memorable person in the room. Often, it comes from making other people feel memorable. The Stoic approach is simple. Pay attention to what is in front of you, instead of constantly thinking about how you are being perceived. The moment you stop monitoring yourself, you become more available to others. And people naturally move toward those who make them feel understood. Here's a practical exercise. For the next 24 hours, ask one follow-up question before sharing your own story. If someone tells you about a challenge, explore it. If they mention a goal, ask about it. If they share an experience, stay with it for a moment longer. You'll notice something surprising. Conversations become deeper with less effort. Trust develops faster, and your presence begins to feel less like a performance and more like a connection. Because truly attractive people are not obsessed with being interesting, they are interested. And once that habit becomes natural, even the way you move through the world starts to change. Attractive people do not always move differently, but they almost always move more deliberately. Watch what happens when someone enters a room while mentally scattered. They rush, check their phone, adjust things repeatedly, look around for reactions. Their body arrives, but their attention doesn't. Most people never realize how much of their inner state becomes visible through small movements. The Stoics often emphasize that discipline begins with what is under your control, and your physical presence is one of the most immediate things you can influence. When your movements are rushed, your mind usually follows. When your movements become intentional, your mind often starts to settle. This doesn't mean moving slowly for the sake of appearance. It means removing unnecessary urgency. Think about someone who sits down calmly before speaking. Someone who doesn't interrupt silence with nervous motion. Someone who isn't constantly reaching for a screen every few seconds. That person often appears more confident, even when saying very little. Why? Because calm movement signals that nothing inside is chasing immediate relief, and people instinctively trust that kind of stability. Here's a practical exercise you can use today. Choose 4 ordinary moments. Walking into a room, sitting down, answering a question, picking up your phone. For each moment, slow the first movement by 10%. Not enough to look strange, just enough to become conscious. You'll quickly notice how many actions normally happen on autopilot, and as awareness increases, presence increases with it. A memorable life is built from deliberate moments. A memorable presence is built the same way, because when you stop rushing through your actions, people begin to feel something increasingly rare around you. Composure. And that composure becomes even stronger when you learn that not everything about your life needs to be shared. One of the most misunderstood forms of attractiveness is privacy, not secrecy, not manipulation. Privacy. Many people share too much, too soon, not because they're dishonest, because they feel uncomfortable holding parts of themselves without external validation, so they explain their plans before taking action. Share personal struggles with people who haven't earned that trust. Reveal every detail of their lives in search of connection. But connection and exposure are not the same thing. The Stoics understood that not every thought deserves expression. Not every emotion requires an audience. Not every person deserves full access to your inner world. A strong presence knows the difference between openness and leakage. Consider someone who constantly announces every goal, every project, every setback, every frustration. Their energy becomes scattered. Now, think of someone who quietly works, quietly improves, and speaks when there is something meaningful to share. Which person feels more grounded? Usually the second, because restraint creates gravity. Here's an uncomfortable question. Are you sharing because it serves the conversation, or because silence makes you feel invisible? Many people discover that a surprising amount of oversharing comes from a hidden desire to be reassured, to be noticed, to be validated. A practical exercise is to practice earned access. Before sharing something personal, ask yourself, has this person earned the right to hear this? If the answer is no, keep it private for now, not out of fear, out of respect for your own boundaries. Remember, a valuable book is not attractive because every page is open at once. Its value comes from depth that is revealed gradually. The same is true for people. And once you stop giving everyone unrestricted access to your inner world, you become capable of building something even more powerful. A life that doesn't depend on the approval of the room around you. Here's the turning point most people never see. Attractiveness is not created inside social situations. It is revealed there. Many people try to become more attractive by improving conversations, learning social skills, or managing impressions. Those things matter, but they are not the foundation. The foundation is the life you return to when the conversation ends. If your day feels empty, every interaction becomes emotionally expensive. You need people to notice you. You need praise to feel motivated. You need approval to feel significant. The room becomes responsible for emotions that should be generated from within. That is a heavy burden for anyone to carry, and people sense it. Now, imagine someone with a different life. He has goals he cares about, work that challenges him, habits he respects, promises he keeps to himself. Whether people applaud him or ignore him today changes very little about what he does tomorrow. That independence creates a quiet kind of confidence, not arrogance, freedom. The Stoics repeatedly return to the same principle. Build your life around what is under your control, your character, your effort, your decisions, your discipline. The more your identity depends on those things, the less dependent you become on external reactions. Here's a practical exercise. Choose one discipline for the next 24 hours that nobody gets to see. No announcement, no social media post, no conversation about it. Maybe it's a workout, maybe it's reading, maybe it's finishing a task you've been avoiding. Do it privately. Then notice how different it feels when progress exists without applause, because something important happens when you stop performing your growth. Your self-respect becomes less dependent on witnesses, and that shift changes the way you enter every room. You stop asking people to confirm your value, you carry your value with you, and when that happens, even your words begin to sound different. Many people believe strong communication means talking more. It usually means talking better. Words gain value when they are not wasted. Yet most conversations are filled with unnecessary language, filler words, repeated points, explanations that continue long after the message is clear. The result is simple. The more words used to carry an idea, the less weight each word tends to have. People who command attention quietly understand this. They do not rush to speak, they do not compete for airtime, and they rarely say 5 sentences when one will do. This doesn't make them silent, it makes them intentional. Think about the people whose words stay with you. Often, they are not the ones who spoke the most. They are the ones who spoke with clarity. Their sentences feel considered, their opinions feel earned, their words arrive with purpose. The Stoic mindset encourages this kind of discipline. Before speaking, ask, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this useful? That brief pause eliminates a surprising amount of noise, and when the noise disappears, substance becomes visible. Here's a practical exercise. For the next day, use a simple filter before important conversations. Ask yourself, what is the clearest true sentence I can say right now? Not the most impressive sentence, not the safest sentence, the clearest one. You'll notice that conversations become calmer, arguments become shorter, and people begin paying closer attention when you do speak, because attention is often earned through selectivity. A person who speaks constantly teaches others to listen less. A person who speaks deliberately teaches others to listen more. And once your words become more intentional, another challenge appears. Learning how to protect your time and energy without becoming cold or distant. Many people confuse kindness with availability. They believe being liked requires saying yes, being accommodating, being endlessly flexible, avoiding disappointment at all costs. But over time, this habit creates resentment, not respect. Because every time you abandon a boundary to gain approval, you quietly teach yourself that your needs matter less than other people's comfort, and people often notice that before you do. The most attractive individuals are rarely the ones who agree with everything. They are the ones who can remain kind while remaining clear. They do not become hostile. They do not create drama. They simply know where they end and where others begin. Imagine someone asking for a favor you genuinely cannot give. One person invents excuses, apologizes excessively, and feels guilty for days. Another calmly says, "I can't do that, but I hope it works out." The second response is not rude, it's honest, and honesty creates stability. The Stoics viewed boundaries as a form of self-governance. If you cannot direct your own time, attention, and energy, someone else eventually will. That's why boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They help you decide what deserves access to your resources. Here's a practical exercise. Today, identify one small request you would normally accept out of guilt. Pause before answering. Ask yourself, do I genuinely want to do this? Or am I afraid of how I'll be perceived if I refuse? That question alone exposes countless unconscious habits, and it leads to a deeper form of self-respect. Because attractive people are not respected merely because they are agreeable. They are respected because their yes means something, their no means something, and both come from the same place: integrity. Before we continue, I'd like to hear from you. Which habit has weakened your presence the most lately? Over-explaining, reacting too quickly, oversharing, chasing approval, or struggling with boundaries? Leave your answer in the comments. Your response might help someone else recognize a pattern they've never put into words. And that brings us to one of the most powerful habits of all: the ability to stop needing immediate validation. Many social struggles have the same hidden root: the need for immediate validation. It appears in different forms: checking your phone repeatedly after sending a message, wondering why someone hasn't replied, looking for signs of approval after sharing an opinion, feeling unusually good when praised and unusually unsettled when ignored. None of these behaviors make you weak, they make you human. But when they become habits, they quietly hand control of your emotional state to other people. And that comes at a cost, because the more dependent you become on external reactions, the less stable your confidence becomes. One compliment lifts you, one criticism drops you, one response excites you, one silence disturbs you. You are no longer directing your emotions, you are outsourcing them. The Stoics challenged this tendency relentlessly. They believed peace comes from focusing on what belongs to you rather than chasing what belongs to others. Their opinions belong to them. Their reactions belong to them. Your character belongs to you. And that distinction changes everything. Here's a practical exercise. Practice delayed reassurance. The next time you send a message, resist the urge to immediately check for a reply. When you post something, avoid monitoring reactions for a period of time. When you share an idea, allow it to exist without demanding instant feedback. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. That's normal. Discomfort often reveals dependence, and dependence cannot be reduced until it becomes visible. A memorable sentence to keep in mind is this: the person who needs the least reassurance often possesses the greatest freedom, not because they don't care, because their self-worth no longer rises and falls with every response. And when you stop chasing validation, something else begins to emerge naturally. People stop seeing someone who wants approval. They start seeing someone who has standards. At some point, every person faces a choice. Talk about your standards or live them. Most people are impressed by words for a few minutes. They are convinced by patterns over time. This is why silent attractiveness has very little to do with image and everything to do with consistency. Anyone can describe the person they want to become. Far fewer can demonstrate it repeatedly. Think about the co-worker who always arrives prepared, the friend who keeps his word, the person who follows through without reminders. None of these behaviors are dramatic, yet they create trust faster than almost anything else. Because reliability is visible, you don't have to announce it. People experience it. The Stoics believed that character is revealed through action, not intention. Good intentions are easy. Consistent behavior is difficult. And difficulty is precisely what gives standards their value. Many people weaken their presence by constantly explaining who they are. Strong people spend more time becoming who they claim to be. That's why discipline is attractive. Clean habits are attractive. Responsibility is attractive, not because they impress others, because they demonstrate self-respect. Here's a practical exercise. Choose one standard that people can observe without you mentioning it. Maybe it's punctuality, maybe it's physical fitness, maybe it's keeping commitments, maybe it's staying calm under pressure. Then focus on living that standard consistently for the next week. Do not advertise it. Do not seek recognition for it. Let behavior speak first. Over time, something interesting happens. People stop trusting your promises. They begin trusting your patterns, and patterns are far more powerful. A man who repeatedly does what he says gains a form of credibility that cannot be manufactured. Because the strongest reputation is never built through self-promotion, it is built through evidence. And ultimately, all of these habits lead toward one final quality that separates attractive people from merely impressive ones: the ability to leave others better than you found them. The final habit is not about gaining attention, it's about the effect you leave behind. Most people judge social success by how they felt after an interaction. Attractive people think differently. They pay attention to how others felt after being around them. Did people leave feeling respected? Did they leave feeling calmer? Did they leave feeling understood? Or did they leave feeling drained, judged, interrupted, or dismissed? This question changes everything, because true attractiveness is not just presence. It's influence. Not influence through pressure, influence through character. Think about the people you genuinely enjoy being around. Often, they are not the most entertaining. They are the people who create a better emotional atmosphere. They listen without competing, speak without dominating, disagree without attacking, and encourage without pretending. Their presence feels clean. The Stoics understood that every interaction is an opportunity to practice virtue, patience, wisdom, temperance, respect. Not because the world rewards these qualities immediately, because they shape the kind of person you become. Here's a practical exercise you can apply today. Before ending one conversation, leave something valuable behind. A sincere thank you, a thoughtful observation, a word of encouragement, a useful insight. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced, just something genuine. Many people spend their lives trying to be remembered. Ironically, people are remembered most when they focus less on themselves and more on the quality of their presence. A memorable sentence is this: people may forget your stories, your opinions, and even your achievements, but they rarely forget how they consistently felt around you. And when all 11 habits are viewed together, a deeper pattern begins to appear, a pattern that changes the entire meaning of attraction. If you step back and look at all 11 habits, you'll notice something important. None of them require special talent, none require status, none require perfect looks, and none depend on manipulating other people. They all point toward the same principle: reduce emotional dependence, increase personal responsibility, the habit of saying less, the habit of reacting less, the habit of listening more, the habit of moving deliberately, the habit of protecting your privacy, the habit of building a meaningful life, the habit of speaking with clarity, the habit of maintaining boundaries, the habit of releasing the need for validation, the habit of living your standards, the habit of improving the atmosphere around you. Together, these habits create something rare: a person whose value is not negotiated in every interaction, a person who does not need constant reassurance to feel secure, a person who remains himself regardless of applause or criticism. This is the Stoic understanding of attractiveness. Not becoming magnetic by chasing attention, becoming magnetic by no longer depending on it. The greatest shift happens when you realize that attractiveness is not something you project outward. It is something that emerges when inner conflict begins to disappear. When you stop performing, stop proving, stop chasing, stop explaining. You create space for something stronger: presence. And presence is difficult to ignore. Which brings us back to where this video began. At the beginning of this video, we talked about the person who leaves a conversation and immediately starts replaying it, analyzing every sentence, questioning every reaction, searching for proof that they were accepted. Now imagine that same person walking away differently. Not because the conversation was perfect, not because everyone liked them, not because they finally found the right words, but because they asked a better question. Not, did they approve of me? But, did I show up with dignity? Did I listen? Did I stay grounded? Did I respect my boundaries? Did I act according to my values? Those are questions that return control to you, and that is the real lesson. Silent attractiveness is not about becoming mysterious. It's not about becoming distant, and it's certainly not about making people chase you. It's about becoming so rooted in your own character that you stop needing every interaction to confirm your worth. The irony is beautiful. The less desperately you seek attention, the more comfortable people feel around you. The less you try to impress, the more authentic you become. The less you depend on validation, the stronger your presence grows. So choose one habit from this video, not all 11, just one. Practice it during the next 24 hours. Give it your full attention, because real change rarely happens through massive transformation. It happens through repeated small decisions, and those decisions eventually become character. If this journey toward calm strength, self-respect, and stoic living is something you want to continue, subscribe and join us for the next video. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which of these 11 habits will you begin practicing first? Until next time, stay steady, stay conscious, and remember, the strongest presence in any room belongs to the person who no longer needs the room to decide who they are.